and I run totally.co.uk. And I'm here today with a video lesson for you guys on IGCSE First Language English for directed writing. We're going to have a look at 3 different student examples and unpick what makes them successful and how they could have further improved. So let's get into it. Don't forget that if you would like to study live with me, I do often run live classes, especially masterclasses for First Language English, 2-month revision boosters, and long-term classes. You can see all of my upcoming events on my events calendar on my website. The link is also in the description. And I have got a premium writing course for IGCSE First Language English, which will cover directed writing with examples and skills breakdowns. So if you are interested in doing something a little bit more intense, feel free to check out that premium writing course. All right, so just a quick reminder that directed writing appears on your paper 2, which is worth 50% of your overall grade. Therefore, directed writing is worth 25% of your overall grade. For that, you will have to read usually 2 articles. Recently this year, 1 article in one time zone. But in the past, since 2020, it has generally been 2 articles. And respond to those arguments. You have to evaluate the ideas given to you in an argumentative or persuasive or informative speech, letter or article. You should spend roughly about 1 hour on that, about 10 minutes to read and plan, 45 minutes to write, and about 5 minutes to proofread at the end. Do remember that narrative writing and descriptive writing are worth the same as directed writing. So I would literally split your paper 2 in half, right? It's 2 hours total, 1 hour for section A, 1 hour for section B. Be really strict with yourself so that you don't run out of time and then lose loads of marks, because they're both worth the same amount of marks. So you need to dedicate the same amount of time to both of them. All right, so as we read through the examples today, my examiner hat is going on, right? You have to separate the reading mark and the writing mark. So the reading mark is out of 15 and the writing mark is out of 25. And they are completely separate. Someone can score full marks for reading and very low marks for writing. So we keep them separate in our minds. Basically, what I would look out for is details, opinion, and evaluation. So if you've got lots of details, but you never give your opinion, you are stuck in 5 to 6. You are selecting and commenting on explicit ideas. You're making a general response with a few relevant ideas. Not a lot of details, not really giving your opinion. Most students don't really get here. Most students will get at least here. So in 7 to 9, that means that you have got some explicit ideas, maybe not loads, but you do give your opinion. So you are beginning to evaluate by giving your opinion, but you're not fully evaluating. And it is including relevant ideas from the text. Not loads, it's not detailed, but you have got relevant ideas from the text. You are focused on those texts. Now, most students will kind of be on the borderline between 9 and 10, right? The difference between a 9 and a 10 is 9 doesn't have evaluation, 10 does. So for the next band, 10 to 12, you have got some successful evaluation. So you have got 1 evaluation point or more, perhaps. Generally, if you're getting 10, that means you've got 1 evaluation point. You've got your opinion and you've got explicit details from the text. So some successful evaluation, thorough response supported by a detailed selection of relevant ideas. You will have a fair number of relevant ideas, probably about 5. But generally, if you have an evaluation point, the examiner will put you here unless you really don't have a lot of details. Usually, having an evaluation means that you're going to be here. To be in the top band, and frankly, not a lot of students under exam conditions will get here. And it doesn't matter really, because the grade boundaries are so low that if you don't get in the top band, it doesn't mean you can't get an A star. But basically, you would have a 3 or 4 evaluation points, probably 4 or more. I would say probably 1 per main body paragraph I would typically see to be successfully evaluating ideas and opinions. So you're not just doing it sometimes, you are doing it quite a lot of the time and doing it quite successfully. By the way, if you don't know what evaluation is, I've got a full video called What is Evaluation? I am going to break it down very briefly later on, but if this is completely new to you, I do really recommend that video lesson. In my humble opinion, it's very good, so I would check that out. And you are assimilating ideas, meaning that you're taking lots of different details from the text and weaving them into your own argument. right? So not just like sticking them in and summarizing them, but really using them to form the basis of your own response, giving a developed and sophisticated response where you're fully explaining your ideas, fully explaining your arguments. So this is what I'm looking for reading. And that's going to be like one of my main focuses today, really, but I am also going to focus a little bit on writing structure too. Okay, so let's now have a look at our question. So we're going to read the question before we read the text. That's just good exam strategy. You need to know what the topic is, what you're looking out for. Do always be thinking, what side does Cambridge want me to argue? Sometimes it will literally tell you to argue in favour for blah, blah, blah topic. Often it doesn't, but sometimes it will. So the question says, write an article for your school or college newspaper about how young people should communicate in their first jobs. In your article, you should evaluate the ideas, attitudes and opinions in both texts. Advise young people on the factors they should consider when communicating with their work colleagues. Base your article on what you have read in both texts, but be careful to use your own words. Address both of the bullet points, write about 200 to 350 words. A suggestion, not a limit. If you go over, it's fine. To be honest, most students that score highly will go over that word count. There is no penalty, don't worry about it. Okay, so we haven't read the text yet, but we are writing for a school or college newspaper. So our audience is younger people, and we're trying to give them advice on how to speak in their first jobs. Are we going to be telling them that the way that they speak is rubbish and terrible and that it's completely wrong? Likely not. Just consider that. Advise them, so we're giving them advice. What should they consider? What should they do? What should they not do? On the different factors, so different elements that they should consider when communicating with their work colleagues. Now, I'm going to give you a hint. Cambridge, if it's about young people, they want you to defend yourselves. I've read quite a lot of this question where basically students are just like, young people are so dumb. Oh my God, how can you communicate like that? Who even uses an emoji and OMG to their boss? Boo, young people, you suck. Cambridge don't want you to do that. They are in favour of young people. So we're going to be a bit critical here, right? We're going to read these texts and we're not going to assume that everything that they say is true. This is the skill of directed writing. Don't read these texts as though they are gospel, as though they are fact. You read them with a critical mind. Is this true? Is this fair? Is this always the case? What about if this? What about if this? But in my experience, this. So we're going to be a little bit critical. So you can guess that we're going to see some criticism of young people. How are we going to defend them? We're going to defend ourselves, right? We're going to defend our brothers and our sisters from the older generation, telling us that their way is right and our way is wrong. Why is it? Right? Question that. Let's have a look at those texts now. And these are the same texts that the student exemplars are going to respond to. Okay, so here are our texts, and we're keeping in mind our topic is giving advice to young people about how they should communicate in the workplace. So let's read. Now, my exam tactic, as always, is going to be, I've read the question, so I know what my topic is, and now I'm going to highlight for the explicit arguments what are the main points that the two texts are making about communication in the workplace. And as I'm reading, I'm going to be critical. I'm going to be thinking, is this true? Could I give an example of a case where maybe it's not true? Could I extend this? I'm going to be thinking, could any of these therefore give some advice to young people? So I'm going to be reading, summarising, but keeping my critical mind open. All right, this passage is an article about how language in the workplace is changing. Okay, interesting. Straight away, language in the workplace is changing. Can we fight the inevitable? If it is changing, why try to stop it from changing? Isn't change part of life? Is it possible to stop change? Would you want to stop change? Isn't change a synonym for progress? Alrighty guys, I've evaluated. We're one sentence in. If you've ever tried to explain a meme, you know how big the cultural divide between generations can be. And while yelling in capital letters and misunderstood emojis are harmless in an online family group chat, workplace communication is much more fraught. Is it? Why would workplace communication be any more sensitive than the family group chat? Maybe it's just my family group chats. They are also fraught. Okay, but we're coming on to a big idea of a cultural divide between generations. It's almost creating an us versus them tone immediately, which I don't know if it's true. My nana loves learning some new slang, so I'm going to be a little bit critical there. Does such a thing exist? And also, might a question, hasn't this always existed? Isn't change inevitable? Workplace harmony depends on successful communication. Language gaps between senior leadership and newer employees are usually bridged by a shared grasp of business speak, the jargon that applies in specific areas of work. But now the first truly digital generation of young people is entering the workplace, often a virtual one, and workplace communication is undergoing a major shift. Okay, so there's always going to be language gaps between younger and older workers, but usually they've got that shared business speak that helps them to understand each other. So maybe some advice would be learn the key terms of your industry, right? We can still have our younger way of speaking, but maybe, just maybe, we're going to advise young people you still need to learn those specific words. Might counter argue though, if the workplace is often a virtual one, then why shouldn't we have more internet speak? Like, that language was specifically crafted for the internet. So if workplace is virtual, why not embrace online speak? What are the benefits of it? Faster. Emojis can show emotion in a way that emails can't. Can show emotions. Can prevent conflict. Or even my younger sister, she likes to do you know this? /S to show sarcasm. So like there are ways of showing emotion online now, like adopting ways to show emotion online, previously not able in letters, memos, emails. Miscommunication is common. Hasn't it always been common? Isn't that just part of work? To younger workers, formal business communication seem cold and harsh, bit of an assumption. While younger people are too casual for others, also an assumption. Could there be benefits of being too casual? Casual could create closeness, friendship, not always a bad thing. Could benefit businesses to have closer employee relationships. So see here, I'm not reading it and just going, yeah, true. Young people suck. I'm reading it and going, is this true? Could it actually be a benefit if people are more casual? Traditionally, the responsibility has been on younger workers to assimilate into office culture, but things are changing. Is that fair? Why is it young people have to assimilate? Why don't older workers have to assimilate and learn and grow? So I could find a middle ground and say, actually, assimilation should go both ways. Both old and young need to work to understand each other. Like, the older workers are probably going to be bosses. Part of your job as a boss is to know and understand and build relationships with the younger workers. So if you're refusing to do that and being like, you need to come to me, then you aren't doing your basic job. Again, I'm being critical and defending my young bros, right? Every generation has their own youth slang and pop culture code that they use in social situations. Older generations tended to adapt their ways of speaking and writing to the more formal expectations of the workplace. Does the workplace have to be more formal? But staff in their 20s are keeping things much more casual. They're starting to pull down the barriers between work and social and personal or social life, creating a more relaxed workspace. These are people who consider both a meeting on a laptop and an actual office to be face-to-face working after all. All right. I mean, I teach all my classes online. Doesn't mean that they're any less valid or helpful than in real life. Like, what even is in real life these days? So again, I'm going to be a bit critical here and say, is formality needed in the workplace? What are the benefits of being relaxed? Like, don't you think people would be more productive if they felt comfortable and able to express themselves, compared to if they feel like they've got to be rigid and can't show their true personalities? Might allow them to be more creative in a changing workplace. And I do also think the internet has changed the way that we work, and we are having online meetings. And again, I don't think that online work is just as valid as in office work. I say that as someone that works 100% online now. I'm defending myself. New workers who are who are digitally fluent now have far more influence over communication and culture. It goes beyond slang and internet speak abbreviations. So many students, when I've seen this, they just focus really heavily on don't use slang, don't use OMG, don't use emojis. But it's not about those small things. It's actually just about the tone and the way that we communicate with each other. So don't get too focused on slang and emojis. This is about communication more broadly. I've seen students go quite wrong with that. A generation used to informal, near constant contact rejects accepted ways of doing things. Spurning a prim email in favour of a quick message, emojis included. But that can be tough for older generations who are used to defining the professional rules of communication. Okay, so previously they had emails and now we've got quick messenger. I definitely know that at my last school. We were on Teams and me and the other teachers would quickly send each other a message. One sentence rather than the full email. Yours sincerely, Miss Essa O'Rourke. So what are the benefits of this? Quick messages equal more efficient, less time wasted. And also it's because the technology's changed. Like, it's not because young people are innately biologically more casual than older people. Like, we are this way because of the technological landscape that we grew up in. This is what's natural and normal and native to us. So this just mirrors the technology used in everyday life, adapting to the reality of the technological landscape. And then later on it says, older people, they're used to defining the professional rules of communication. Why should they get to do this? Why is it that they're right? Surely that should be something that is shared responsibility. And then the final paragraph, newer employees can be encouraged to maintain decorum and formality and maybe go easy on the emojis and emails. So that could be some advice that we could give. Or perhaps we should run training on emojis for older managers. Who knows how people will talk and write to their colleagues and bosses when today's school students get their first jobs. I think that last bit links this idea of change is inevitable. Like, you are trying to stop something that you are never going to be able to stop. So why fight against the tide? Why not try to understand it? So maybe older workers can be trained on things like using chat, Teams to be a little bit quicker, on emojis to show emotion, to prevent people thinking, oh my God, she's been so rude to me. One of my tutees said that they were really surprised that I sometimes ended my emails like this. And it's just because literally sometimes I'd send her an email like, do this, do this, do this. And I felt like I'd been too commanding. So I put a little smiley face at the end to show that I wasn't trying to be like nasty or domineering with her. So I do think emojis have got a benefit there. And I would also just say, what is the point of formality? I do believe personally that it does play a certain role, just in terms of you not overstepping or getting yourself in trouble with your boss. It's always better to be more polite than you need to be than say something that you regret. But I don't know if it always leads to the closest relationships or the most creative thinking. So text 1, I've highlighted the key arguments and I've been a little bit critical as I've read. Obviously, in an exam, you wouldn't be able to write quite as much as this, but you would be able to quickly jot down a few ideas in note form. Let's now read the second text, and remember, we're thinking communication in the workplace. What advice could we give young people? The following passage is taken from a letter from a reader written to a newspaper letters page. My eldest grandson, a smart, courteous, recent graduate and something of a high flyer, secured a good job straight out of university in one of the country's new up-and-coming tech companies. We celebrated his tremendous success, and his parents, having struggled in their ordinary jobs to give him the best education, breathed a sigh of relief. Okay, not really sure where we're going so far, but I would say if he's working in tech, like tech companies like famously are more casual, more creative. Think about something like Google. I think they had like a ball pit. They're all allowed to wear t-shirts and jeans. They've got like creative workspaces. So they're naturally more informal. So far that's just what I'm thinking. Is there really a need to be so formal if you are working in the tech industry? So maybe some advice that we could give the students is also know your industry and its expectations. Like working in education is very different to working in tech, is very different to working in social care. And each of those will have like its own standard style of interacting, hierarchy, language. So maybe that's something that we need to consider as a bit of a middle ground. So far, so good. After a month, though, I'm seriously worried that his expensive education has not equipped him to deal with working life. I'm older, I know. But the way he speaks about and even to his colleagues and superiors is going to land him in trouble, and he doesn't even seem to realise it. Right, how do you know? You're not there. Why are you like, oh, he's talking to them very informally? You don't know. And it's going to land him in trouble. You don't know. You don't know his boss. You don't know his industry. You don't actually know what you're talking about, Grandma. Sorry, but you don't here. So assumptions that the working landscape is the same today. Not all bosses expect deference, bowing down to them, and formality. But we do also need to keep in mind, like, we don't want to offend bosses. We don't want to get in trouble. We don't want to get sacked. That's something that young people would need to keep in mind. Know your boss, who you're talking to, and adapt accordingly. Don't want to get fired. For example, in his induction course, a very senior staff member told the new recruits, "I'm always open to new ideas." Something I doubt she meant literally. How do you know, Grandma? But my hapless grandson, rude. If my grandma wrote a letter about me to the newspaper and called me hapless and was talking about how I'm going to get sacked, I would be so offended. This is rude. Yeah, okay, anyway, hapless grandson promptly sent her an email outlining all of his bright ideas for the company. That could be a good thing. Being relaxed and feeling like you can express yourself could actually help the business to improve. Relaxed and expressing yourself openly can benefit the business. Genuine improvements. But yeah, of course, you don't actually want to upset your boss by feeling like you're criticizing them. So we might say, but be careful for your tone, not to sound too critical, and maybe like one issue at a time. If you send a whole list, it suggests like the business is terrible. Maybe just focus on one big issue. I shuddered even more when he proudly showed me the email. This grandparent is horrible. It began, "Hi, Megan," ending with one of those incomprehensible symbols and a suggestion that they might do a face-to-face to discuss ideas. What's your problem, Grandma? What is your problem? So I guess that she thinks that "Hi, Megan" is too informal because "hi" rather than "dear," Megan rather than Miss Smith, that the fact that it ends with an emoji. I don't necessarily think, like, this is what I mean, be critical. I don't necessarily think that is a bad thing. Again, the emoji could prevent offence for all Grandma knows. She's not spoke to Megan. She doesn't know. She's just immediately assuming that her grandson is an idiot. So mean. What a nasty grandma. All right. Of course, I know offices aren't the stuffy, over-formal settings they were when I got my first job. And a good thing too. I never even referred to colleagues I'd worked with for years by their first names, and that seems ridiculous now. Yeah, it is. Like, if you're going to work with people, why not make friends? I mean, you're spending 8 hours of your day there. You don't want to be so close, of course, that you're going to get yourself into trouble by oversharing. But it seems like a miserable way to live your life to not make any friends at work. So work is for 8 hours, 5 times a week, 40-hour work week. Should you be so formal, good and healthy to make friends, Grandma? We had silly business jargon then too, but my grandson's overfamiliar slang, abbreviated words and constant messaging rather than measured email can't be going down well, can it? How do you know? By your own admission, you've never worked in this sector, so how will he ever be taken seriously in his career if he doesn't learn to adapt to proper workplace behaviour in the way that he communicates? I would say proper workplace behaviour changes. It's influx. Influx changes depending on the sector, the industry that you're working in, depending on the time, depending on even just the personality of your boss, the size of the business. Like, she's talking as though this is like one single set thing. There is a single way that you behave in the workplace, proper workplace behaviour. In my experience, that's just not true. You know, I've worked in bars, I've worked at a shoe shop, I've worked in schools, and now I work for myself as a tutor and work with parents and students. And the way that I need to communicate has vastly changed. And that's all in like 15 years. So I don't really think it's about things changing because of time. It's about personalities, it's about sector, it's about context. Why would a young man who had earned the highest English grades not punctuate properly? Because it's fast sometimes. You're quickly sending a message. A kid is fighting in the background of your classroom. You haven't got time for an apostrophe. You just need to send the message. He writes as if he's sitting in a cafe with his peers and not a professional working environment. I think grammar is misunderstanding perhaps the speed that's needed in modern business. If it's via chat, I don't really care if someone's not used a capital letter. And I'm an English teacher, sorry, but I don't care. Because the point is you're just quickly sending a message to get your point across. Chat's purpose is speed, not accuracy. Okay, so now that I'm suitably annoyed, we've read our two texts. Here are the explicit points, highlighted in green. Here are some of my evaluation points that I might include at the side. Let's have a quick look now at the mark scheme, just so that we can see if Cambridge agrees. So as we read the example text, we're going to have a look for these explicit ideas and also for the implicit ideas. So the explicit arguments made in text A were, older people don't understand young people's way of communication. Misunderstandings can create problems at work. Shared business jargon used to be a common language. Digitally aware people behave and speak in a totally different way. Younger workers used to learn to adapt their language. Older workers set standards in the past. New workers are more likely to have informal language style. Not clear how workplace language will change over time. So these are things that are all explicitly, clearly stated in the text, something that we could highlight, right? It's not evaluation, this is just summary. And explicit ideas from text B. Education doesn't equip workers with language needed at work. Modern workers show less formality and deference at work. Bowing down. Older people find new worker style shocking. Let them be shocked, I say. Workplace language has always changed over time. Messaging rather than emailing is common for younger workers, and younger workers may jeopardise their progress by not communicating appropriately. So again, this is just summary. But if we think about those two slides, the explicit arguments in text A and text B, basically the main thing that you are going to be writing about, giving your opinion about and evaluating is this debate. Whether young people need to adapt at work or if the way that young people communicate could actually be a problem. So do we need to change? Is it a problem? What could be the benefits? What advice do we need to give? Where I've seen students go really wrong is they just focus about formality in the workplace generally, but not on language, right? Remember, the topic is communication in the workplace. So is it a problem the way that young people communicate? Do they need to change the way that they communicate? How would you advise them to communicate? So keep communication at the centre of your topic. All right, the implicit ideas. So we are going to evaluate the implicit ideas, things that are suggested in the text or things that we can pull out of the text. Basically, evaluation. So we are evaluating the implicit ideas. Now, remember, I've got a whole video lesson. Just search Totally Evaluation. It'll come up where I go over this in much more depth and give really specific examples. But remember that evaluation is essentially these three things: being critical of the text and making an effective counter-argument, extending the idea to a new context. Here is advice for young people. How could that apply to young people in the workplace? And finding a middle ground between the two texts. You know, is there a space where, okay, there's benefits to being informal and being close with your workmates, but there's definitely a line. Don't become too informal where it can jeopardise your career prospects. And we're going to find maybe somewhere in between the two texts. We are going to avoid just summarising and agreeing. If you just summarise and say, you're right, aren't young people terrible? you're not going to get evaluation. We are going to stay critical, probing and curious about the ideas that the texts are expressing. Critical, probing, curious, not just repetitive. So then what are the evaluation points that Cambridge suggest? Let's have a look at those. These are what the examiner is going to look out for. Generally, if you find one of them, I've got to give you 10 out of 15 for reading. If you've got something that isn't on the mark scheme, but I, as an examiner, feel, yes, that's evaluation, that's very evaluative, you can still be credited, right? So it doesn't just have to be what's on this mark scheme, by the way. So here are the evaluation points according to Cambridge from the official mark scheme. Older people don't want to give up control of workplace communication. New workplaces may have different expectations from older established companies, like the tech industry. No, maybe grandma. Changes in communication have always happened, just a continuation. This is nothing new. Same old thing. Old people are always going to complain about young people. And when you guys are old people, you'll be complaining about the young people. It's just what happens. Informality and a lack of deference isn't necessarily a bad thing, isn't necessarily detrimental, can be useful for XYZ reasons. You need to gauge, figure out how to communicate appropriately in each setting to make progress. Know your boss, know your industry, and adjust accordingly. Younger workers don't automatically have a right to change communication styles, but they inevitably will change it. So no one has a right to say this is how we must communicate. We need to find a middle ground between older and younger generations. Older or younger workers should compromise in order to communicate better at work, and modern workplaces value different qualities, like problem solving and creativity rather than following the rules. So actually the modern landscape of work has changed. It's no longer about hierarchy, probably because lots of jobs that required that have now been automated. Lots of jobs now are more about you coming up with creative ideas, because anything that can be just kind of spat out can be done probably digitally by robots, by the internet, by AI. So why are they hiring humans? Because we have got the ability to think originally, which computers so far can't really do. I do believe ChatGPT comes up with the most boring and unoriginal stories that I've ever read. So right now, October 2025, humans are creative, technology less so. Okay, we are now going to have a look at the texts. As we have a look at them, do focus on their structure. So I've often seen students tell me that they structure their work like this, like these two boxes. So they often do intro, summary of text A, summary of text B, evaluate the ideas and give advice, conclusion, or introduction, for, against, evaluate the ideas, give advice, conclusion. That can be a problem, simply because if you are just summarising text A and text B, or summarising the arguments for and against, where are you evaluating? If you're only dedicating one paragraph to evaluating on giving ideas, you're probably not going to get that much evaluation. So I am a little bit cautious of it, and you'll see some examples here where it doesn't quite go right for the student. They've basically just got the starting paragraphs that aren't really achieving a lot in terms of reading. Okay, so we're now going to have a look at 3 different example responses. Let's go. Okay, so this example response and all of the example responses actually come from my masterclass students. Remember I said that I run masterclasses twice a year. They're 2-month intensive revision courses, basically. And each week you'll do an exam practice and get marking from me. So here's an example of some of that marking. So this one comes from Lily. She says, workplace communication, Instagram description or Shakespeare, employment, finding work, the daunting and dreaded part of everyone's life. Our teachers at GMIS love to remind us of this when our grades are particularly low. You'll need these grades to get a job, you know. Then in a few years, we will get our degrees and get shoved into a whirlwind of corporate fiascos. Calls, reports, and the Lord forbidden thread of emails. However, nobody teaches us how to tackle communication in your classes. You don't even get a handbook. Us newbies are baby birds pushed headfirst out of the nest and told, now, go fly. And really, why does it have to be like this? So far, so good. We have got this kind of article tone. She makes me feel like she is a student writing in a school magazine about her school. She even names the school GMIS, and she uses collective pronouns and direct address. Us newbies, because she's also a student, you don't. And we've got a nice semi-formal tone. She's also got a detail from text B, which is that no one ever teaches people how to communicate. So this is nice. Main body paragraph. The world is constantly shifting under our feet. As you've probably heard a million times, the digital world is bringing in a whole new way of thinking and communicating. Summary from text A. So when one of your particular senior colleagues see that you've merely sent a text to update rather than an email or a messenger pigeon if they're really old, nice use of humour, one of those abhorrent emoji things, they're going to feel as if you aren't really taking them seriously. Idea from text B, the idea of emojis. There's a giant disconnect between how older people expect people to communicate and how people, especially teens who are much more digitally aware, talk naturally. Explicit detail text A. Our generation is breaking a certain standard, has been held in the workplace and forced on use for decades, for better or for worse. So see, so far she's mainly summarising, right? She's giving her opinion that she disagrees with it, but she's not really evaluating because she's just summarising. And you're going to see down here, she's going to start to evaluate here, but then what was the purpose of this, right? What do you think about this? Evaluate those ideas. Is it fair? How could you counter-argue it? The real question now is, who tries to change for whom? On one hand, using such casual jargon may harm people's idea of us, which will be worse for our career in the long term. That is actually a point from text B. So we have got a detail here. The more progressive view, however, suggests that this language creates a calmer environment and incites better mutual communication between all parties. I think that was a point from text A. The idea of being more relaxed is definitely a detail. I can't remember off the top of my head which text it's from, but it's definitely a detail. So how should we communicate in our first jobs? Unfortunately, the clearest and most obvious answer is it depends. That's almost evaluation. She needs to say why it depends, and she's about to do that right now. But notice so far, lots of summary. So she's not picked up any evaluation points so far. So if she stopped right here, she would be getting 9 out of 15 for reading. Thankfully, she doesn't stop there. You must always recognise the context. Observe your surroundings in your workplace. Are your co-workers mostly young people who are more digitally aware? Or rather, people who anticipate an unnecessary number of polysyllabic words, that should be Lily. Who is your boss and what does your company seek in a worker? Not everyone wants to shoehorn an abbreviation or your colourful ideas for a company's reform in each conversation. It is important to read when it is appropriate and adapt where what's needed. So that's actually a detail from text B, the idea of giving your boss ideas for improvements. But notice she's got evaluation here. It depends, recognise the context, adapt according to who your co-workers are. So this idea of there's no one right or wrong way to act, simply you need to act suitably for your workplace. So that is evaluation. However, there's always merit in compromise, another bit of evaluation. This idea of it's not young people who need to adapt or old people that need to adapt, it's both of us. We need to meet in the middle. No matter how much you try to adapt to other people, no matter how much older generations may try to uphold the standard, there is no slowing of change of the English language, and it is always going to change and undergo reforms. Another bit of evaluation there. Change will always happen, especially with language. Language is always going to have transition points. Let it happen. It's okay to slip up and simply do what feels comfortable and right for you in the moment. And it's even more okay to call out aspects of the workplace you don't agree with. It's not always a bad thing to be informal, and your messenger pigeon colleagues will have to come around one day. This is almost evaluation if she said why. So if she developed that, then she would have got some evaluation. As it stands, it's just opinion, but it's very close. As students enter the workplace, we have the opportunity to shape a more authentic and generally better workplace culture for ourselves, one that is much less difficult to navigate and one that is still as effective as the current. We decide our own future, and this is just the beginning. So again, we will have a generally better workplace culture for ourselves. We can shape it ourselves. And I said, why will this be better? If she would have developed that and said, what are the benefits of being informal and relaxed? She could have got some more evaluation. Okay, so how did she score? So for reading, she had 3 evaluation points and she had more than 5. I added on 2 more details as I read. So she's got lots of details and 3 evaluation points. So I gave her 12 out of 15. So she's right at the top here. Some successful evaluation. That for me is because she's got 3 and she's got the whole first half of her answer where she's not really evaluating, but she's definitely got a detailed selection of ideas. So 12. Then for writing, I gave her 21 out of 24. So that is right at the top of level 5, almost the top band. I thought her register was highly effective. She sounded like a young person writing for a young person's magazine, and her vocabulary was wide, used with some precision. Grammar, almost accurate. There were some parts that felt a little bit awkward. Overall, putting her here at 21 out of 24. I thought her vocabulary could be more ambitious, and there were some parts where it just felt a little bit clunky and awkward, like Lord Forbidden Thread, for example. Okay, let's now have a look at another masterclass student. This is one that is relatively long, and again, you'll notice a fair amount of summary. So this is where I'm a little bit wary of the structure where you just summarize text A, summarize text B, for and against. It's really better to be evaluating the whole way through. So as you say points from text A, evaluate them. As you say points from text B, evaluate them, right? So we're remaining critical, argumentative, probing the whole way through. Talking, an overlooked art form. Introduction. Have you ever received a text from your mum and thought, that looks so wrong? Maybe it was an unsuitable emoji or writing out a full sentence instead of just using an acronym. Turns out language evolves. And how people use it, especially at the office, has evolved even more due to the rise of the internet. She's got a point here from text B. If she would have said language evolves and therefore trying to stop it is foolish, then that would be evaluation. But she hasn't quite developed that point enough for me to credit her for evaluation. Also remember that the text question said you're writing for your school or college newspaper. I haven't got the sense of that in her intro. Different people communicate differently. And the range is greater than ever, but why should it matter to us? Well, most of us in this college, first sense of audience there, will be off to a job or some sort of work environment post-graduation, unless of course you plan to hibernate, which is totally valid too. So we've got a nice semi-formal tone, a little bit of joking, a little bit of liveliness, which is quite nice. Communication matters. Our English professor, John White, when I interviewed him for this article. From an efficiency perspective, it is in everyone's best interest if a ubiquitous or any effective form is adopted. Detail from text A. People will be less stressed and confused, and tasks will be done faster if everyone is on the same page and time wasting avoided. There's no need to do quotations like this. It's not getting her any more points or any less points. I'm just like, okay, maybe feels a tiny bit random, but she's got some details in there. It would be nice to say, this idea of time and confusion, she could develop those ideas and say actually how messaging can save time, why that would be beneficial for the business and for students as future workers. But see, mostly summary. So she's not really challenging the ideas, she's just repeating them. But how? How exactly should you communicate in your first job? There are a myriad of things to consider. Well, it can be absolutely convenient to dilute your formality with how you talk normally. It is crucial to bear in mind the seniors, whose normal talk is formality. It's a little bit clunky and awkward, could be phrased a bit more smoothly. To you, it is restrictive and boring, but for them, it's all they know. So here we've got a point from text B, which is this idea of older people tend to communicate more formally, can cause a little bit of confusion. Your good intentions may be even taken as insulting if you are too informal. This is an idea from text B. That's what Grandma says. But where should the line be drawn? And what is the optimum level of formality where older folks are not snorting at the absence of structure, while the younger employees are not suffocated by the dryness? Not sure about the word choice there. And again, if she said, where should the line be drawn? The idea that it's not a single line, that it changes depending on context, that would be evaluation. So she really needs to stop and be critical. She's got lots of points that could be evaluated, but because she's in this kind of mindset of summarizing, she hasn't really started evaluating yet. Okay, now she does. Of course, it would be quite unfair for us to be expected to adapt and fit into the mould. Efforts from both sides will be needed to meet in the middle. Her first area of evaluation here. Inversely, some actions could be put into practice to ensure that you are closer to the magic middle ground that is the recipe for perfect coordination. Okay, so now she's going to give some advice. I feel like as well, because the students are kind of going text A, text B, advice, evaluation, that the point of this whole article is to give advice. So it feels a little bit like we're not really getting to the main point. until now for me. Firstly, separate the art of getting your points across to the degree that you will receive here. A little bit clunky in terms of the expression right here. Research shows that communication is an entirely distinct skill that is independent on our formal education from. Don't take it personally if you're not understood or if you become the subject of confusion for your word choices. So ideas from text A here. Trial and error. Adapt and learn. See what works from your peers and yourself, your own comfort. This is evaluation. This idea of there's no one single right way to communicate. See your workplace. Adapt accordingly. I do think saying firstly, secondly, thirdly, finally is a little bit rigid, a little bit year 8, primary school, not very sophisticated. I would recommend against. I personally just don't like it. Secondly, context is king. This, you're probably wondering why I didn't mark it for evaluation. The same idea as this, that's why. A message to a co-worker who is your age will be miles apart to how you email your boss. Well, it is true that treating everyone in a friendly, relaxed manner can create a bubbly and chatty and lively environment. Some conversations are better left colourless and punctuated for the sake of sophistication, simplicity, respect and orderly conduct. Here, if she would have extended, why would this actually be quite good for a business? Then she would have got some more evaluation. Lastly, when in doubt, opt for the more concise and maybe technical structure that is understood by all. That maybe, it's not on the mark scheme, but I possibly could credit her for evaluation for that, depending on how kind I was feeling that day. Here, author's verdict and conclusion. Quite formal for a school magazine article, I feel. I often find it rather hypocritical that we, the people who have entered the employment world, a little bit clunky, are expected to adopt to the ways of this world instantly. Why? If she would have said why there, she could have got some evaluation. I get it, change is difficult. But if change allows us to cut back on the amount of time spent on crafting our English assignments, work emails, and helps everyone feel more friendly, I fail to see a problem. Almost evaluation again. I would also she swapped it around. Similarly, I believe it's time for the more experienced to put effort into taking our situations into consideration and cut back on the expectations to be understood without explaining and while being the physical embodiment of a robot. Here, if she would have said, what's the effort? Why don't you train? Why don't you learn how the style of our speaking that could be a benefit for these reasons? She would have got some evaluation. I would also like to leave the reader with the courage to communicate how you communicate. If emojis, spelling error, and short sentences are your thing, make it known to avoid misunderstandings. That maybe could be evaluative. Maybe a little. So there's a fair number of explicit points and we've definitely got some evaluation. I've got 2 clear bits and there were some bits later on where I was like, maybe that's kind of evaluative. So this is how she scored. So because she had 2 evaluation points, I gave her 11. So this is 1 less than the other one. Okay, so the first one, Lily's had 3, she got 12, this one's got 2, she got 11. If she would have had 1, she'd get 10. It does roughly kind of work out mathematically that way. Of course, there needs to be a balance of, is she giving her opinion and does she have details? But both of the students do, so therefore it's 11 and 12. For writing, I thought it was similar to be honest, to Lily's, but there were a few more bits that were a bit more awkward and clunky. It didn't always flow. And also the paragraphing, I felt a little bit broken up at times. Didn't like the firstly, secondly, thirdly. So I gave her 19. So it's the same band. She's still in level 5, just like Lily, but Lily was 21. This one's 19. She's very securely in this band. She is effective. She does have a secure overall structure, does have a wide range of vocabulary, effective register, and spelling, punctuation and grammar mostly accurate, minor errors. So I think she's about here. She's in this band. Last but not least, let's have a look at Harry's. So I picked Harry's because it asks for an article, and I think students sometimes make their articles quite chatty, lively, semi-formal, full of humour, which is fine and good to do. But you can also be quite mature, argumentative, persuasive and passionate. And I think that, for me, is something that would probably push you up a tiny bit higher because it's harder to do. It's a more complex written style. And Harry very much does that. So pay attention to this kind of different writing style. You will notice it, and I do prefer it personally. As our generation of students at Merseyside High School steps into adulthood, we need to be well prepared and adapt to the next stage of our lives, an environment that all of us will be in, a workplace. With social media more popular than ever before, it is hard to ignore the cultural influence it has created among our generation. From in-person dialogue to online texting, our way of communicating is increasingly different from previous generations. I'm going to give him extra detail there for A. So notice we have very much got some audience. He's named his school. It's clear that he is also a student at this school. All of us, because Harry will also be entering this workplace, and our generation. So he's using lots of collective pronouns to show that he is a student. I also quite like the metaphor of stepping into adulthood. In workplaces where people of varying ages inevitably meet, miscommunication can easily happen. Point from text A. A formal comment may sound emotionless and hostile to younger staff, while on the other hand, a friendly, casual greeting might be interpreted as disrespectful by someone older. Still ideas from text A. Even with genuine and kind intentions, we can come across as something more negative. Who wants unintended conflict or trouble due to mere communication error? Now, it's important that we recognise this issue before real consequences occur at our future jobs. Imagine the perspective of the other person when having a conversation in an office. Like with friends, we have to adapt and talk differently to communicate effectively. Whether it's our body language, tone, or word choices, they all make a difference in communication. This is it's getting towards evaluation, but not quite. What I quite like that Harry's done is he's summarised ideas from text A, then he's gone into advice. Right, so he's not doing a separate advice paragraph. He's summarising and then saying, based on these ideas, here's my advice. It would be nice to give some more specific tips about that, language, tone, word choices. And it would be nice for him to expand on this idea of adapting to context and talking differently, because that could get him to that evaluation point. In social communication courses, this here I'm assuming is a class at Merseyside High, so it's some good audience. We were taught about various situations in which effective communication is necessary. It shouldn't be a surprise that situations require varying levels of formality. Although workplaces aren't as solemn and as inflexible as before, a report or email should still be more formal than a note to a colleague. So we must know when more casual language isn't appropriate. For instance, would you use modern slang when talking to a teacher? So this idea of adapting your language. Formal here, informal here, recognise the context, that there is evaluation. So he's got some evaluation points. Many people believe that our demographic, incorrect word choice there, our generation, our cohort, is stubborn about the way of interacting and influencing others that way. But often we just aren't aware of our informal language, as well as the cultural gap. I would suggest that Merseyside High School provide a course teaching students proper knowledge to write formal text appropriately. That there is actually a detail from text A where it says we're never taught that in school. So this is quite nice. He could link that out and get more evaluation if he came onto this idea, is it only young people that should adjust? Should older people also be trained just as younger people are trained? The younger generation is often blamed when facing communication problems in the job for being too casual or not appropriate. Ideas from text A. We are encouraged to make significant changes and compromises to adapt to the culture of older people. Ideas from text B. But being appropriate in the workplace doesn't have to mean that people of all ages and backgrounds must talk and communicate in the same way. Evaluation. Right? We don't all have to be the same. Middle ground, therefore evaluation. What if we can communicate effectively without leaving behind the unique culture and language of our generation? Apart from the slang and emojis, we can still have our own personalities while being mindful and respectful in suitable situations. So that's some evaluation. This idea of just because you've got an emoji doesn't mean you're not being respectful. You can still keep your personality and be formal, be respectful. So middle ground, evaluation. As work environments evolve, the way we communicate and the workplace expectations will change. B. Being respectful and considerate of different demographics is important, but we also don't have to conform to the only right way of communicating that many insist on offices. Evaluation. There is no one single right way to communicate. Miscommunication is impossible to avoid entirely, but staying educated and mindful, we can prevent many troubles that none of us want to be involved in. If this is a conclusion, he didn't make it super clear. It felt perhaps a little bit like randomly stopped, a bit abrupt, so I think he could have made that a bit clearer in terms of writing style. Okay, so for Harry's, I just added on 2 more details that we found as we were reading. The main thing really that the examiner is looking out for is, have you got a range? Not looking for a specific number, just that in each paragraph you are focused on the text and addressing ideas in them. The main thing that I would really be looking out for is evaluation. And we've got 3 examples of evaluation in here. So like Lily, I gave him 12. So if you get 1, it's 10, 2 is 11, 3 is 12, so he got 12. I would want to see a little bit more evaluation, perhaps in this paragraph here, for me to put him up higher. I think if he would have had 1 here and he was almost there, I think I would have given him that 13. His writing was definitely clear and easy to read. His sense of audience and purpose was really clear. Some of the flowing and transitioning between the paragraphs, like when the conclusion was a bit abrupt, that brought him down a little bit, and he could use a little bit more varied punctuation, like semicolons and colons. But I thought overall his written style was really mature, formal, argumentative, some really nice vocabulary, and so because of that I gave him 21 out of 25, which, as you guys will remember, like Lily's, is the top of level 5. He's straddling it. I thought he had a highly effective register and his spelling, punctuation and grammar were almost always accurate, but in terms of the structure and in terms of the vocabulary, I thought that was probably closer to here, so I put him at the top of level 5 in terms of best fit. So those are my 3 examples. Quite a long lesson. Wow, I've been recording for a long time. I do hope that you found it useful. If you did, let me know, because I can do more lessons like this. And if you've got questions, then feel free to pop those in the chat for me as well. If you did like this video lesson, then please like it, comment and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Don't forget that you can find more like this on my website, that's totally.co.uk, and that you can have live classes with me or buy my premium writing course for First Language English Paper 2. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope that I will see you in the next video. Bye!